Hello, everybody. So today we're going to discuss some more economics of the 20th century in Europe, and specifically we're going to be getting into consumerism and the rise of the welfare state. So let's get into it. All right, so some quick reminders. When we last left, Europe was starting, particularly Western Europe, was starting to increase their economies through things like the massive aid of the Marshall Plan, through the creation of the European Economic Community, as well as just massive increase in industrial production, which leads to consumerism. And man, do we love some stuff. There is a theory behind consumerism. The theory is that individuals should buy more goods in order to expand the economy. Okay, and as a result, the world got really good at this. However, have there been some negatives? Well, perhaps if you look at the plight of certain factory workers, let's look at the environment, as well as peace of mind and the desire to have to own stuff. There's definitely some negatives in there. Now, what really allows this to happen was a massive increase in the middle class, and as a result, with the middle class, you're seeing wages are generally going up, allowing more people to buy these consumer goods. Things like TVs, appliances, and cars, like just from 1948 to 1960, so that 12-year period, there were 45 million cars bought. Today, there are 308 million cars in Europe. We also have the rise of credit cards and installment plans. Are this good? Well, see, we got some more problems there. Buying things with money that you don't have. So, whereas, yes, we can drive the economy with this type of stuff, and it's very good, at the same time, we perhaps have some issue. Now, what are some of the companies that do really well? So what you have here are a variety of different companies, all of which are from Europe. Okay. Nestle, which is actually one of the largest companies in the entire world. You can look up to see the stuff that they own. More recently, like Spotify, people don't realize that actually started off as a Swedish company. Lego's from Denmark. So we see these companies and this amount of things that you can buy, and European companies were definitely at the center of it. Now on to the rise of the welfare state. So what are we talking about here? Well, the idea of the welfare state is that federal governments are going to provide a variety of services for their people. And Britain is really the place where this is going to start at, primarily being driven by the Labour Party. In 1946, they pass a variety of laws providing benefits from everywhere from subsidized health care to unemployment insurance and old age pensions. Some examples here, and that would continue on in the 1950s and 60s and actually spread out across Europe. Some examples of things here, you have the National Insurance Act, which establishes comprehensive social security system. Things like it nationalizes medical insurance and it subsidizes unemployment for the sick and the aged. You also have the Health Act, which requires doctors and dentists to work with state hospitals to provide services for people. However, private practices are also maintained within this, but you do have to have some link for through the federal government, because again, the focus on trying to provide aid and basic services, particularly in the health region, for people. Now, again, I still want to go as far as call it socialism. This is a concept that this is socialized, but you're still looking at democratically elected governments, and you still see quite a bit of capitalism here. Remember, all these guys. But it is a move toward providing a variety of different services for the public. And it will expand out from there. Many nations now provide universal health care. Many nations also provide payments for families that have children to provide a minimum level of care for children. Also massively increasing education. And in many states, they offer free or low-cost tuition for universities. Probably the most revolutionary education system in Europe is Finland. Finland is well known by being one of the greatest education systems in the world. And if you are a Finnish citizen, you can go all the way up through getting a doctoral degree without paying for it out of pocket because of the focus. And I talked a lot about them on different types of economies. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what the Finns are doing economically, you can check out some of my other videos. Now, what's a downside? Well, taxes. Okay, actually, I'm sorry, I skipped there. Taxes. We have to understand that these services are expensive and they require higher taxes and high government spending. By the 1980s, many of these nations were spending 50% of their budgets or more on these services. As a result, some nations actually reduce their presence overseas, they reduce international aid. And so that's the whole thing you have to understand is that if you are living in these nations and they provide certain levels of socialized healthcare and whatnot, you will be paying significantly amount more in taxes than you may in other places. So that's something to, take into account. Perhaps the biggest issue, however, with the welfare system is issues in gender. Again, many nations, particularly like Britain and West Germany, would often openly discourage women from getting jobs. Here's a quote that would explain that. During marriage, most women will not be gainfully employed. The small minority of women who undertake paid employment or other gainful occupations after marriage require special treatment different from that of single women. And in a lot of ways, what you see here is many of these places, particularly like Britain and West Germany, are trying to increase their populations and really focus on the role of a woman as a mother. Again, not that there's anything wrong with that, but really putting kind of some undue pressure on there. Like some great example is like women who had children were given additional benefits if they stayed home and didn't work. But if they were married and they did work, they wouldn't receive those benefits. And so, you're really putting women in a very, very difficult spot in order to see equality. And as a result, it was really focusing again on, making women dependent on men, making women dependent on being married and having children to get full benefits that could be offered through the state. And again, this is another kind of form of systematic discrimination that women have faced at this point for thousands of years. And we've discussed it throughout the class. But, once again, these gender concerns are still there. However, in some areas, it wasn't like that, most notably Eastern Europe. Soviet Union and Eastern Europe very much encouraged women to work outside the home. On the right here, you see women working in a factory that typically would be men's work, but this picture that you have here is in Russia. And we actually see in Russia really kind of ahead of the curve for women here. They encourage women to get work. They encourage women to get education. In France, for instance, they actually legally pass a law to recognize women as equal to men, particularly in the workplace. They do offer incentives for women to stay home and have children. But on the flip side, they also offer things like daycare and after-school programs for women who work and families with working mothers. And so France is kind of in the middle. Britain and West Germany, again, kind of that traditional. But the welfare state is something that's a real big part of Europe today. Those ideas of providing specific services for the citizens, most of which revolving around health and education. And again, this isn't socialism. We've talked about socialism in a variety of forms. These are social programs, but as I mentioned in the beginning of this with consumerism, capitalism is still the predominant economic system, and this is still what is being used primarily in Europe today. All right, so that's in addition to some of the other videos we had on the economics of this era. Hopefully it gives you something a little bit more specific and kind of unique to Europe with this welfare state. And I'll see you guys soon. Take care.